Then you watch me. I gave all of me. I was greater than any real vampire.
It's about vampires. I'd hate to be on a farm needing his help tonight.
Hollywood's golden age gave us some of the most unforgettable stars to ever grace the silver screen. But when the cameras stopped rolling and the curtain finally fell, some of these legends made sure they'd be remembered in the most unexpected ways. From Dracula capes to Jack Daniels bottles, these final wishes tell stories that are stranger than any movie script. These are the 10 strangest final burial requests of golden age Hollywood stars. Number 10. Bela Lugosi, buried in full Dracula costume. Bela Lugosi became synonymous with Count Dracula after his mesmerizing performance in the 1931 Universal Pictures film. Born Bela Ferenc Dézsoblasco in Lugos, Hungary, now Lugoj, Romania, on October 20th, 1882, Lugosi had been a distinguished stage actor for years before bringing the vampire count to life on screen. He'd performed in over 170 productions in Hungary before coming to America. His thick Hungarian accent, piercing gaze, and classical theatrical training made him the definitive Dracula for generations. The role of Dracula had actually been offered to other actors first. Universal Pictures initially considered William Courtenay, Ian Keith, and Conrad Veidt for the part. Lugosi had to fight for the role, lobbying the studio relentlessly and ultimately accepting a salary of just $500 per week, far less than his co-stars were making. But he wanted that part desperately, and he got it. The film was a sensation when it opened in 1931. Lugosi's Dracula was seductive, terrifying, and utterly hypnotic. Audiences had never seen anything like him, but that iconic role would follow him long after the cameras stopped rolling, all the way to his grave. On August 16th, 1956, Lugosi died of a heart attack at his Los Angeles home. He was 73 years old. His career had seen better days. The man who once commanded top billing had spent his final years struggling with addiction and taking whatever work he could find, including appearances in low-budget horror films directed by Ed Wood. When it came time to lay him to rest, Lugosi's fifth wife, Hope, and his son, Bela Lugosi Jr., made a decision that would cement his connection to Dracula forever. They dressed him in full Dracula regalia, the black cape, the full costume, complete with his Dracula ring. His body lay in state at the Utter McKinley Mortuary Chapel on Hollywood Boulevard, where mourners could see him one last time, looking exactly as they remembered him from the movies. Here's what makes this story particularly interesting. Lugosi himself never actually requested to be buried in his Dracula costume. His son confirmed this on numerous occasions. It was the family's decision, made because they believed it was what he would have wanted. Hope told the press it was his wish, but Bela Jr. later clarified that he and his mother made the choice themselves. There's even more to the story. The cape Lugosi was actually buried in wasn't the original cape from the 1931 film. Lugosi had given that cape to his wife Lillian years earlier, telling her to keep it for their son. The family used a lighter weight cape that Lugosi had worn for personal appearances instead. The original 1931 cape eventually went to auction years later. Lugosi was laid to rest at Holy Cross Cemetery in Culver City, California. To this day, if his grave were ever disturbed, whoever opened that coffin would find themselves face to face with Count Dracula himself, cape and all. It's a fitting final curtain for the man who gave the world its most iconic vampire. Number 9. Mel Blanc. That's all, folks. On his gravestone. If you grew up watching Looney Tunes cartoons, you heard Mel Blanc's voice almost every day.
You were great, you were perfect, you were better than perfect.
He was Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck, Porky Pig, Tweety Bird, Sylvester the Cat, Yosemite Sam, Foghorn Leghorn, the Tasmanian Devil, Pepe Le Pew, Speedy Gonzales, Marvin the Martian, Wile E. Coyote, and dozens more. They called him the Man of 1,000 Voices, and for good reason. His career spanned over 60 years, from radio's golden age through television animation. Blanc was born Melvin Jerome Blanc in San Francisco on May 30th, 1908, and grew up in Portland, Oregon. According to legend, he changed the spelling of his last name from Blanc to Blanc after a teacher told him he would amount to nothing and be like his name, a blank. Whether that story is true or not, Blanc certainly proved himself to be anything but blank. He started doing voice work as a teenager and eventually made his way to Hollywood in the 1930s, where he began working for Leon Schlesinger Productions, which later became Warner Brothers Cartoons. Blanc's big break came in 1937 when he replaced Joe Dougherty as the voice of Porky Pig. Dougherty actually had a natural stutter, but it was too difficult to control for recording purposes. Blanc created his own version of Porky's stutter, making it more consistent and controllable while still giving the character that memorable speech pattern. That same year, he debuted as Daffy Duck. The character's unhinged, wacky voice was pure Blanc invention. What made Blanc truly special was his range. Think about it. Bugs Bunny's Brooklyn-inflected wise guy and Yosemite Sam's explosive, high-pitched tirades don't sound anything alike, yet they're the same person. Porky Pig's stuttering signature sign-off was Blanc's creation. The Roadrunner's beep beep came from his vocal cords. Tweety Bird's innocent lisp masked a devious streak that Blanc brought to life perfectly. For decades, millions of people heard his voice every single day without even knowing his name. Blanc died on July 10, 1989, at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles. He was 81 years old. His health had been failing. He'd been diagnosed with emphysema after smoking since age 9, and he also had advanced coronary artery disease. Ironically, his last words on camera were delivered while filming a commercial, and they were the same 4 words that had ended countless Warner Brothers cartoons. That's all, folks. His will contained a specific request for his memorial marker. Blanc wanted his gravestone to read, "That's all, folks," the phrase that Porky Pig had used to conclude Warner Brothers. Cartoons from 1937 to 1946. It was perfect. Those 4 words had signaled the end of so many Saturday morning cartoons, and now they would mark the end of the man who had brought those characters to life. The gravestone was installed at Hollywood Forever Cemetery in time for the first anniversary of his death. His son, Noel Blanc, oversaw the installation of the 5-foot white marble monument. It sits in Section 13, Pinewood Section, Plot 149, and it reads exactly as Mel specified, "That's all, folks," along with "Man of 1,000 Voices," and "Beloved Husband and Father." Fans still visit the grave regularly, paying tribute to the voice that defined their childhoods. Some leave carrots for Bugs, others leave drawings of the characters he voiced. It's a simple epitaph, but it says everything that needs to be said. Mel Blanc gave us laughter for 6 decades, and when his time came, he signed off the same way he always had. Number 8. Harry Houdini, buried in his performance coffin with letters from his mother as a pillow. Harry Houdini wasn't a movie star in the traditional sense, but he was one of the most famous entertainers of the early 20th century, and his films helped cement his legendary status.
Harry's voice that was a speech that he would give before he performed the water torture cell every night.
Born Eric Wise in Budapest on March 24, 1874, he immigrated to America with his family as a child and grew up in Appleton, Wisconsin, before moving to New York City. He became the world's most famous escape artist and illusionist. He could escape from handcuffs, earning him the nickname Harry Handcuff Houdini, straitjackets, locked trunks thrown into rivers, sealed milk cans filled with water, and prison cells. His escape acts were legendary. He'd have himself shackled and thrown into the East River. He'd be sealed in a milk can filled with water while audiences held their breath. He'd escape from straitjackets while suspended upside down from buildings. In 1912, he introduced his most famous act, the Chinese water torture cell, where he was suspended upside down in a locked glass and steel cabinet filled with water. The act was so dangerous that he made audiences wait in tense silence before he finally emerged, dripping and triumphant. But Houdini had one thing he could never escape: his devotion to his mother. Cecilia Weiss died on July 17, 1913, while Houdini was performing in Europe. He didn't make it back in time to see her before she died. The guilt and grief devastated him. His friend and fellow magician Howard Thurston said of him, "His love for his mother was his deepest devotion." Houdini carried that grief with him for the rest of his life, reading and rereading her letters constantly. He even spent years trying to contact her through seances before becoming disillusioned with spiritualism and dedicating himself to exposing fake mediums as frauds. On October 31, 1926, Halloween, Houdini died at age 52 from peritonitis following a ruptured appendix. The circumstances were bizarre. A college student had punched him in the stomach several times to test whether Houdini could really withstand blows to the abdomen as he claimed. The punches may have contributed to his appendix rupturing, though doctors couldn't say for certain. Houdini's burial arrangements were as theatrical as his life. He was buried in a bronze casket that he had actually used in one of his escape tape acts, a coffin designed for his buried alive performances. Inside that outer casket was a special coffin liner with a glass top, also used in his performances. The casket was hermetically sealed and placed in a concrete burial vault. But the most touching detail involves his pillow. Houdini's will specified that his head should rest on a pillow made from a stack of letters his mother had written to him over the years. He carried those letters everywhere, reading and rereading them. In death, he wanted them close to him, quite literally under his head for all eternity. Houdini was laid to rest in Machpelah Cemetery in Queens, New York, in a family plot that he had designed himself. The grave features a large monument with a bust of Houdini, though that bust has been vandalized and replaced multiple times over the years. Each year, the Society of American Magicians performs a broken wand ceremony at his grave, a ritual honoring a deceased magician. His widow Bess wanted to be buried beside him, but because Machpelah is a Jewish cemetery and she was Catholic, she was buried 35 miles away at Gate of Heaven Cemetery in Westchester County. Her tombstone appears next to his at Machpelah, but it's only a marker. Her death date remains blank because she's not actually there. To this day, some people gather at his grave on Halloween, hoping he'll make one final escape from death itself. So far, he hasn't. But somewhere beneath that monument, the great Houdini rests his head on his mother's love letters, the one shackle he never wanted to escape. Number 7. Rudolph Valentino, Borrowed Crypt, and The Lady in Black. Rudolph Valentino was the first true male sex symbol of Hollywood. Women didn't just admire him, they fainted over him, wrote passionate letters to him, and mobbed theaters just to catch a glimpse of him. The Italian-born actor, born Rodolfo Pietro Filiberto Raffaello Guglielmi di Valentina d'Antonguola on May 6, 1895, became an international sensation in the early 1920s with films like The Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse and The Sheik. He was exotic, romantic, and mysterious. They called him the Great Lover and the Latin Lover, and his popularity was unlike anything Hollywood had seen before. Valentino's rise to fame was meteoric. He'd come to America in 1913 with barely any money and worked as a gardener, dishwasher, and taxi dancer in New York. He made his way to Hollywood and appeared in bit parts before director Rex Ingram cast him in The Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse in 1921. His tango scene with co-star Beatrice Dominguez made him an overnight sensation. The film grossed over $4 million and became one of the highest-grossing silent films ever made. His next film, The Sheik, cemented his status as a romantic icon. He played an Arab sheik who kidnaps an Englishwoman and holds her captive in the desert. The film was controversial but hugely popular, spawning countless imitations and establishing Valentino as the template for the romantic leading man. Women went wild for him. He received thousands of fan letters every week. Magazines published photos of him constantly. He was the first male movie star to inspire mass hysteria among female fans. On August 15, 1926, Valentino collapsed at the Hotel Ambassador in New York City. He was hospitalized with a ruptured gastric ulcer and acute appendicitis. Despite surgery, he developed peritonitis. On August 23rd, at the age of just 31, Rudolph Valentino died. What followed was mass hysteria. An estimated 100,000 people lined the streets of New York to view his body at the Frank E. Campbell Funeral Home. Crowds smashed windows trying to get inside. Women wept openly in the streets. Riots broke out, requiring over 100 mounted police officers to restore order. Reports claimed that several distraught fans attempted suicide upon hearing of his death, though these accounts were likely exaggerated by the press. Polish actress Pola Negri, claiming to be Valentino's fiancée, made a grand spectacle of her grief. She fainted repeatedly for photographers, both at the viewing and during the funeral. She had an enormous floral arrangement placed by the coffin that spelled out Pola in flowers. Her theatrical mourning became almost as famous as the funeral itself. Here's where Valentino's burial gets unusual. He had made no arrangements whatsoever for his final resting place. He was only 31. Why would he? When his body was transported to Hollywood for a second funeral, his friend June Mathis, a screenwriter and one of the people who had helped launch his career, offered a solution. She had purchased a crypt at Hollywood Memorial Park, now Hollywood Forever Cemetery, for her husband, but they had since divorced. She offered it to Valentino temporarily, assuming his family would eventually move him to a permanent location. Valentino was placed in that crypt after a private funeral at the Church of the Good Shepherd in Beverly Hills on September 7, 1926. The service was much quieter than the chaos in New York, attended only by family and close friends. Stars like Gloria Swanson, Charlie Chaplin, Mary Pickford, and Douglas Fairbanks were there to pay their respects. The temporary arrangement became permanent. June Mathis died just 1 year later, in 1927, and was placed in the crypt next to Valentino. They remain side by side to this day in the Cathedral Mausoleum at Hollywood Forever. But perhaps the strangest part of Valentino's burial legacy is the Lady in Black. Starting 1 year after his death, a mysterious woman dressed in black began appearing at his crypt on the anniversary of his death, August 23rd. She would place a single red rose on his crypt and leave without identifying herself. This continued for years, and eventually other women began showing up in black as well, creating a whole tradition of ladies in black visiting Valentino's grave. The identity of the original Lady in Black is disputed, but the most convincing claimant was a woman named Dietra Flame. She said that when she was 14 years old and sick in the hospital, Valentino had visited her and brought her a single red rose. She vowed to return the gesture every year after his death. Whether that story is true or not, the tradition continues. Even now, nearly a century after his death, people still leave roses at Valentino's crypt, honoring Hollywood's first great romantic idol. Number 6. Ed Wood's unusual treatment of Bela Lugosi's final footage. This entry is about what happened to Bela Lugosi after his burial, but it belongs on this list because of how unusual it was. Director Ed Wood, known for making some of the worst movies ever filmed, had a strange friendship with Lugosi in the actor's final years. Wood cast the aging, struggling Lugosi in several of his films, giving him work when few others would. Just before Lugosi died in 1956, Wood shot some test footage of him for a film that didn't yet have a script. Wood had Lugosi put on his Dracula cape and filmed him walking around in front of Tor Johnson's house, wandering through a suburban graveyard, and standing in front of Lugosi's apartment building. There was no particular storyline. Wood just wanted footage of his friend in that iconic cape. When Lugosi died shortly after, Wood decided to use that footage in a new film. He built an entire movie around those few minutes of material, creating Plan 9 from Outer Space, which is often called the worst movie ever made. But Wood didn't have enough footage of Lugosi to complete the film, so he hired his wife's chiropractor, Tom Mason, to double for the dead actor in additional scenes. There was just one problem. Tom Mason was noticeably taller and thinner than Lugosi, so in every scene with Mason, Wood had him hold the cape over the lower half of his face, trying to hide the fact that it wasn't actually Bela Lugosi. It didn't work. The deception is painfully obvious when you watch the film. In a way, Lugosi got the last laugh. He was buried in his Dracula costume, and then he appeared in one more film wearing that same costume, even though he was already in his grave. The footage in Plan 9 from Outer Space is literally the last time Bela Lugosi appeared on film, shot just days before his death, with him wearing the same outfit he'd be buried in. It's ghoulish, it's strange, and it's perfectly fitting for the man who played the most famous vampire of all time. Number 5. W.C. Fields, I'd Rather Be in Philadelphia. W.C. Fields was one of the great comedians of early Hollywood, known for his misanthropic humor, his bulbous nose, and his well-documented love of alcohol. He appeared in silent films and talkies, perfecting a persona as a cynical, hard-drinking curmudgeon who had no patience for children, dogs, or polite society. His timing was impeccable, his wit was razor-sharp, and audiences loved him for being politically incorrect long before that term existed. Fields was born William Claude Dukenfield in Philadelphia on January 29, 1880, though he later claimed 1879 to make himself seem younger. He had a difficult childhood and ran away from home at age 11 after his father struck him during an argument. He lived on the streets, stealing food to survive, and taught himself to juggle to make money. By his teenage years, he'd become skilled enough to perform in vaudeville. His juggling act was unique. He combined incredible skill with deliberate comic fumbles, making audiences laugh while also impressing them with his dexterity. He traveled the world with his act, performing in Europe and Australia. By the time he transitioned to movies, he'd perfected the cantankerous persona that would make him famous. He made classics like It's a Gift, The Bank Dick, and Never Give a Sucker an Even Break, playing characters who were always slightly drunk, deeply cynical, and hilariously confrontational. He died on December 25, 1946, Christmas Day, which was fitting for a man who famously disliked the holiday. He was 66 years old. For years, people believed that Fields had requested his tombstone read, "On the whole, I'd rather be in Philadelphia." It's a perfect W.C. Fields line, dry, unexpected, and vaguely insulting to wherever he happened to be buried, which was Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Glendale, California, not Philadelphia. There's just one problem. He probably never said it. His gravestone at Forest Lawn doesn't have that inscription. It simply reads W.C. Fields 1880 to 1946. The famous quote appears to be apocryphal, likely invented by a magazine writer shortly after Fields' death. However, Fields did make other unusual provisions in his will. He left money to establish the W.C. Fields College for orphan white boys and girls, where no religion of any sort is to be preached. The will specified that the orphanage should be non-sectarian, and that children of all races should be admitted, despite the odd wording. His family contested the will, and the orphanage was never built, but the attempt shows that Fields' misanthropic persona had some genuine heart underneath. Whether or not Fields actually requested the Philadelphia epitaph, the quote has become so associated with him that it might as well be true. It perfectly captures his sardonic sense of humor and his ability to deliver a punchline even from beyond the grave. And every Christmas Day since his death, fans still visit his grave to toast his memory, usually with a martini. Number 4. Jean Harlow, Forest Lawn's Sanctuary of Benediction. Jean Harlow was the original blonde bombshell, the platinum-haired sex symbol who became one of Hollywood's biggest stars in the 1930s. She appeared in films like Hell's Angels, Red Dust, and Dinner at 8. She had a natural comedic talent and a screen presence that made her unforgettable.
Shake and go to the head of your class. Now, wait a minute, Fred.
She was only 26 years old when she died of kidney failure on June 7, 1937. Harlow's mother was a Christian Scientist who refused to allow her daughter proper medical treatment during her final illness. By the time Harlow was taken to the hospital, it was too late. Her death shocked Hollywood and devastated her millions of fans. William Powell, the actor she had been engaged to marry, was heartbroken. Powell paid for her funeral and burial, sparing no expense. Harlow was laid to rest in a marble sanctuary at Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Glendale. The crypt bears the inscription, "Our Baby," which her mother chose. But here's what makes her burial unusual. Powell arranged for his own burial place to be near Harlow's, and when he died in 1984 at age 91, he was buried close to his former fiancée, despite having been married to actress Diana Lewis for more than 40 years at the time of his death. Even more unusual is what Powell did during the decades between Harlow's death and his own. He reportedly paid for roses to be placed at her crypt every day for years after her death. Some sources say he paid for flowers for the rest of his life, though this claim is difficult to verify. What's certain is that Powell never truly got over losing her. Harlow's crypt is located in the Sanctuary of Benediction at Forest Lawn, an elaborate marble room that costs a fortune to access. Her mother, Jean Poe Bellow, is entombed beside her. William Powell is nearby, and Clark Gable, who starred with Harlow in several films and was also devoted to her memory, is in the same complex. Decades after her death, fans still leave flowers and lipstick kisses on her crypt, honoring Hollywood's first platinum blonde. Number 3. Hattie McDaniel, denied her final wish. Hattie McDaniel made history in 1940 when she became the first African American to win an Academy Award, earning Best Supporting Actress for her role as Mammy in Gone with the Wind. It was a groundbreaking achievement, though McDaniel faced criticism from some in the black community who felt the role reinforced negative stereotypes. She defended her choices, famously saying she'd rather play a maid for $700 a week than be won for $7. McDaniel was born in 1893 in Wichita, Kansas, the youngest of 13 children. She started her career in vaudeville, then moved into radio and films. Besides her Oscar-winning role, she appeared in over 300 films and became a fixture in Hollywood as one of the few black actresses working steadily during that era. When McDaniel died on October 26, 1952, of breast cancer, she made a specific request. She wanted to be buried at Hollywood Memorial Park, now Hollywood Forever Cemetery, where many of her colleagues from the film industry were interred. It was a natural wish. She wanted to rest among her peers, the actors and filmmakers she'd worked with throughout her career. But there was a problem. In 1952, Hollywood Memorial Park, like many cemeteries, was segregated. The cemetery's owner, Jules Roth, refused to allow McDaniel to be buried there because of her race. Despite her historic Oscar win, despite her decades of work in Hollywood, despite her expressed final wish, she was turned away. Instead, McDaniel was buried at Angelus Rosedale Cemetery in Los Angeles, a cemetery that did accept black burials. Her grave there is marked with a simple headstone bearing her name and dates. The story doesn't end there. In 1998, new owners took over Hollywood Memorial Park and renamed it Hollywood Forever Cemetery. They made a sincere effort to right past wrongs, including the injustice done to Hattie McDaniel. They contacted McDaniel's family and offered to transfer her remains to the cemetery, fulfilling her original wish. The family declined, feeling that moving her grave would be disrespectful. Instead, Hollywood Forever Cemetery erected a cenotaph, a monument to someone buried elsewhere, in McDaniel's honor. It's located in one of the best spots in the entire cemetery, overlooking the beautiful lake. The inscription reads, "Aunt Hattie McDaniel, her enduring contribution to motion picture arts and her monumental achievement." It's not the burial she requested, but it's a belated acknowledgement of the respect she should have been shown in the first place. McDaniel's story is a reminder that even in death, segregation and racism continued to affect Black Americans. Her final burial request wasn't unusual or strange. She simply wanted to be buried with her colleagues. That such a reasonable wish was denied makes it one of the most heartbreaking stories in Hollywood history. Number 2. Clara Bow, Ashes Scattered at Sea After Years in a Niche. Clara Bow was the it girl of the 1920s, the embodiment of the flapper era with her bobbed hair, bright eyes, and vivacious personality. She starred in over 50 films during the silent era and early talkies, most famously in the 1927 film It, which gave her the nickname that would follow her forever. At the height of her fame, she received more fan mail than any other star in Hollywood, but fame took its toll on Bow. She suffered from anxiety and what would now be diagnosed as severe mental illness. Scandals plagued her career, some real, many invented by tabloids. She retired from acting in 1933 at age 28 and lived the rest of her life largely in seclusion. Bow died on September 27, 1965 at age 60 in Los Angeles. She had been living quietly with her husband, former Western star Rex Bell, who had died the year before. Her death from a heart attack received relatively little media attention. The world had moved on from the it girl of the Roaring Twenties. After her death, Bow's sons had her body cremated. Her ashes were initially placed in a niche at Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Glendale, but that wasn't where she would ultimately rest. Years later, her sons retrieved her ashes and scattered them at sea off the coast of Southern California. The decision to scatter her ashes at sea reflected Bow's desire for privacy and escape from public attention. After spending her youth being photographed, gossiped about, and hounded by fans and press, she found peace in obscurity. Having her ashes scattered in the ocean ensured there would be no grave for curiosity seekers to visit, no marker for tabloid photographers to snap pictures of. Clara Bow, who had been one of the most photographed women in the world, disappeared completely, leaving no trace behind except her films. There's something poetic about the it girl vanishing into the Pacific. The woman who represented the excess and glamour of the 1920s ended up as part of the vast, anonymous ocean. It's a final statement of independence from a woman who spent too much of her life being whatever Hollywood wanted her to be. Number 1. Douglas Fairbanks, a reflecting pool monument. Douglas Fairbanks was one of the biggest stars of the silent film era and one of the founders of United Artists Studio. Born in 1883, he became famous for playing swashbuckling heroes in films like The Mark of Zorro, Robin Hood, The Thief of Baghdad, and The Three Musketeers. He was athletic, charming, and impossibly handsome. His marriage to Mary Pickford, America's sweetheart, made them Hollywood's first power couple. Fairbanks was also a businessman and visionary. Along with Charlie Chaplin, D.W. Griffith, and Pickford, he founded United Artists in 1919, giving artists more control over their work. He was the first president of the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences. He helped establish the Motion Picture Relief Fund to help industry workers in need. When Fairbanks died of a heart attack on December 12, 1939, at age 56, Hollywood lost one of its founding fathers. He was initially buried at Hollywood Memorial Park, now Hollywood Forever Cemetery, in a temporary space. But his final resting place would be something much more elaborate and unusual. In 1941, a permanent monument was constructed for Fairbanks at Hollywood Forever. It's unlike any other grave in the cemetery. Designed by architect Howard Seidel, the memorial features a long reflecting pool with a larger-than-life statue of Fairbanks at one end. The reflecting pool stretches out in front of the statue, creating a dramatic, contemplative space. The monument perfectly reflects Fairbanks' larger-than-life personality and his importance to early Hollywood. It's not just a grave, it's a piece of architecture, a park within a cemetery. Visitors can sit by the reflecting pool and contemplate the man who helped create the Hollywood film industry. The monument says everything about how Fairbanks saw himself and how Hollywood saw him, as someone bigger than life, deserving of a memorial that matched his outsized contributions. Mary Pickford, who divorced Fairbanks in 1936 but apparently still cared for him, attended his funeral. She was buried after her own death in 1979 at Forest Lawn in Glendale, choosing not to be buried near her famous ex-husband. Fairbanks' monument stands alone, a testament to one man's vision and to an era of Hollywood that can never be reclaimed. The reflecting pool is especially beautiful at sunset, when the light plays across the water and illuminates Fairbanks' statue. It's become one of the most photographed spots at Hollywood Forever Cemetery, a fitting legacy for a man who spent his life in front of the camera. From Dracula capes to unanswered wishes, these golden age Hollywood stars made sure their final acts would be remembered. Some were buried with the costumes that made them famous. Others were denied the simple dignity they requested. Some disappeared into the sea, while others built monuments that still stand today. Each burial tells a story about who they were, what they valued, and how they wanted to be remembered. If you enjoyed learning about these Hollywood legends and their unusual final wishes, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more fascinating stories from Hollywood's golden age. Leave a comment and let us know which story surprised you the most. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.